You're listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast, celebrating hunting dog heritage, competition, and community. United Kennel Club has been the hunting dog sports home for coonhounds, beagles, retrievers, pointers, cur, feist, and more for over 125 years.
In this edition, we're going to take a look at Rule 14, which discusses all things related to questioning a judge.
Yeah, and there's going to be two different types of judges. One is going to be, that we're going to talk about, one's going to be a non-hunting judge, and then the other one is a hunting judge cast. So let's start with the hunting, or the non-hunting judge. Under A, says the decision of a non-hunting judge may only be questioned in the field at the time the decision is made. Pretty black and white right there. At the time the decision is made, may only be questioned in the field, in this case in the woods, I guess, at the time the decision is made. That's pretty clear there, really, if you think about when the decision was made. That's not 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later after the hunt or any other time. It's at when the decision is made. If I don't agree with that as a handler, it is my responsibility to question that and bring it to fruition if I want to discuss it further. Second sentence, the non-hunting judge's decision cannot be overturned in the field. And that's what that just clarifies or says, is that even though we have four handlers we could all four not agree with your decision that you made. We just we question it with it may be scored with a question mark and reviewed by the master hounds or panel. So we can't, just because all four of us or a majority of disagree with the non-hunting judge, it doesn't work like that. Our vote doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, there's no voting procedure if you're using a non-hunting judge.
So what you do is you score it as the judge ruled on it, and then you ask to have a question put on it if you don't agree with it. And it literally shows to notate a question mark. And then it's reviewed by the master hounds or the panel after the hunt's over. Next sentence, last sentence here in A decision made by a non-hunting judge may only be overturned by the master hounds or the panel, which just clarifies what we were saying. Anything to add to that, Trevor?
I think that one's pretty cut and dry there.
Yep.
And just there is one thing I'll say, and maybe it has more to do with the clubs than anything, but this is whenever master hounds or hunt director or the club officials decide to assign a non-hunting judge, not that you get a card and you guys decide, hey, I got my friend here with me, let's just let him be the non-hunting judge. None of us really want to judge. That's not how it works. We're talking about in an actual non-hunting judge situation where this person was assigned a judge by the club or the official.
Hey, one other thing I would like to go back and add, when you use a non-hunting judge, if you're questioning something that is a judgment call, like whether a dog moved or a judgment call, that is not a rule violation or misapplication. If you're questioning something that's a judgment call in a hunting judge situation, we all have a say in it, and here we don't, and that includes your judgment calls. So just if you bring back a judgment call 99% of the time, those aren't going to be ruled any other way than the way the non-hunting judge, what his judgment was of it. What my judgment and your judgment or the cast member's judgment is doesn't really matter. So you're just kind of wasting everybody's time to bring back a judgment call when you have a hunting judge. Now, if it's a rule, if it involves a rule or a misapplication, different story, but not a judgment call.
Yep.
And one would be, how a tree is scored as far as circled or minus or something like that. That's a judgment call. So.
Yeah, so let's we talked about non-hunting judge cast. Let's talk about hunting judge cast now. And it says the following procedure must be followed when using hunting judges on a cast, regardless of category. So this procedure must be followed, and that doesn't mean just by the hunters and by the judge and by the event officials and by the club, but also us, me and you here at UKC. We can't go outside of what this procedure is. If you get frustrated on a cast and you don't follow the correct procedures and you don't question it and do the entire procedure we're about to go through, and just call us on Monday morning, on Monday morning, and even if we may agree with you that it was done incorrectly, if you didn't follow the correct procedures, our hands are tied. So be sure you pay close attention to this next few bullet points here that we're going to go through. So the first one here says the hunting judge has complete authority and will be responsible for scoring all situations. We've already heard back in the judge number that as soon as the judge gets the card, he's in authority of the cast. That's when it starts, and he's going to be responsible for the scoring situations. He'll sometimes make some judgment calls, like you mentioned, and the hunting judge cast, you have the ability to question those, but the hunting judge will make the call and have the authority for all scoring situations.
Yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot to add to that other than we have already discussed it. And sometimes they have difficult situations to make a ruling on, and the thing that we always suggest is make that call, even if it may not be the right one. Make a call, then allow these procedures to take place instead of maybe an alternate thing of kind of asking around, what do you think, what do you think, what do you think? We always say that a judge that is quick to go to ask everybody else on their thoughts is just a sign of a weak judge.
Right.
So take that for what it is, but make the calls. You are the judge. Let the judge make that decision. Don't try to influence them as a handler in their decision. Just know that you have the if you don't agree with it, then follow the procedures.
Yep.
You can ask for a vote. Number 2. Should a situation arise where a handler questions a call that was made, that's what I was talking about, or a call that should have been made but wasn't, that handler may ask to have his question voted on by all cast members that remain with the cast at that time. So this is the procedure. If you have a question or if you have a situation where you don't agree with the call that the judge made, or a call that you feel should have been made that wasn't, it's at that time you need to raise the question and ask for a cast vote by all members, and you need to do it at that time. We're going to get into it. You need to do it at the time the decision is made.
Yep.
Not 5 minutes later, or at the trucks later on, or on the way back to the club, stop and say, by the way, it doesn't work at that time. So number 2.
Yeah. So if the question arises where you don't agree with the call that a judge made, the next thing that's going to happen in the woods is that there's going to be a cast vote. Each handler must vote or their dog will be scratched. That's the first thing. Now, we've talked about this a little bit in other sections, like maybe you didn't see the infraction or didn't have the best vantage point of maybe who the aggressor was on the tree during a fight, or that's a situation. Or sometimes you don't want to be the bad guy or make a tough decision at a tree, but you don't have that option. We need you out there to vote. And actually, it goes so far to tell you that if you don't vote, your dog's going to be scratched from the hunt. So you do vote. And I don't know, do you have much to add to that?
One thing that I've always suggested, that the question comes up, well, if I didn't see it, how should I vote? So sometimes some guys take, well, I'm going to vote in benefit of the dog. Okay. Are you always going to benefit? What if this dog is beating you? You're still going to do that? But I think a good theory that I've always considered or tried to use and used as advice as well, if I don't see something, you're the judge, and I didn't see something, or I don't have any reason to, or that doesn't give me any reason to dispute your call or your judgment of it, why would I rule against you, against the judge?
Yep.
That's my theory on that. So the rule doesn't say that, but you have to vote. So. But I think if you didn't see it, or to dispute it any other way, why are you disputing it or suggesting or voting in a different way? Judges, we've talked about judges, why they're selected, and that is for their knowledge of the rules, and not just that, but also their integrity and all that. So let them do their job, and if they made the call, and unless you saw it different, then why dispute it?
Yeah, the second sentence here under 3 tells us it takes a majority vote to overturn the judge's decision. Now, if you've been listening to this entire sequence here, you've probably heard a couple scenarios where that may not be the case. One be under babbling, 2B that tells us if a judge makes a call and you question it and it ends up being a 2-2 vote, you would delete the strike points. And then also when you're scoring a tree, a 2-2 vote on the tree could result in points being circled or deleted. But if in the case of a judgment call or a call being put out in the woods, it takes a majority to overturn the judge's decision in all other instances.
Yeah, and that's, if it comes to a vote is what that means,
Yep. Next sentence
so
here.
2-2 is always going to stay. That's not a majority to overturn the judge's decision.
Yep.
Stays with the way the judge voted on it.
The next sentence here says, any handler that is not satisfied with the outcome retains the right to place a question mark on the card and present his question to the master of hounds or the panel.
Hey, what I would add to that, and you can speak on this as well, but so we talked a little bit ago about judgment calls. If it's a rule infraction or misapplication of a rule, that's one thing you want to, we voted on it and we still don't. That may be the reason that I want to put a question mark, because I still feel there was a misapplication of the rules. Voting, as far as a judgment call, I feel that's fine to vote your opinion on how you saw it. If I don't know what it might be, and maybe on how we score trees is a good example of whether we're going to minus it or circle it. That's perfectly fine. But where I may also ask for a vote on it, because it's not a majority to maybe what have you. But that's the type of stuff that, it gives me the rules allow me the right to put a question mark on it. But if I take something back like that, that's probably not going to get overturned. Stay away from that. But a vote on a judgment call should end that, really. That's how it's intended anyways.
Yeah, and I can just read number 4 here real quick, and this is going to be a phrase or a sentence that you guys have heard multiple times if you've been to many UKC license events. It says, situations not questioned and notated at the time judge's decision is made will not be considered.
That's probably a rule that I've had in my brain that I can recite have been able to for a long time.
Yeah.
I might not always know exactly where you're going to find it, but I know it's in there in most all of our rule books. But there's a lot to be said right there, and it's as black and white and as clear as what it says. And that should go for officials. It should go for us. And we can't waver from that. You mentioned a little bit ago, we're bound by these rules as well. So even though we may agree with you, but you didn't question it and notate it at the time the judge's decision is made, will not be considered. I don't know how that means one thing. We can't consider it. That means the official shouldn't consider it. A panel shouldn't consider it. If you appeal it to UKC, we shouldn't consider it. As far as a question and changing any scoring, even if we might agree with you. You do your job and help us help you. But there's a reason why you question these things right away, because there's so many variables, that could be a part of it. And we're not going to spend 3 hours talking about those variables, because there are a lot of them. Even when sometimes you think, well, we all agree now, we just did it wrong, and it makes it changes, and this isn't fair to the dog or dog. Do that out there. There's reasons for this, and we have to stick with it. Number 4 really puts the really puts the lid on things there, as far as when it comes to making any changes that were not questioned at the time the judge's decision was made. Anything else?
No, I think we covered that pretty well.
All right, there you go.
Alan, I know we both have new Dogtra Pathfinder 2s. How are you liking yours so far?
I'm liking it. I've even had the opportunity now to use mine where I didn't have service, where I download the map of that area, and it works flawlessly. Love it.
I agree. I really like my Dogtra Pathfinder 2 as well. I've used it quite a bit the past few months. I really like the crystal clear maps. I like that it doesn't lose service very much, and I don't have many bad things to say about it at all. Dogtra Pathfinder 2, the official GPS collar partner of UKC. In this edition, we're going to take a look at Rule 15, which discusses all things related to electronic devices.
Yeah, so we've been using these devices since, I don't remember the year that we started, but you could always have tracking collars on your dogs, and the only time you could use them was I think during a timeout. And I remember when they first were allowed to be used, we actually did some pilot tests or pilot events with it. One of them that I went to was in Oklahoma. I think it was one of the hunts out in Ada, Oklahoma. I forget if it was. I think it was maybe the big Walker sectional that they have out there every spring. I think it's either that one or the Battle of the Breeds, one or the other. But for 2 nights we did a pilot test and allowed them to be used, and that was something totally foreign. Today we would think, what do you mean? But back then it was foreign, and it was almost like a sin, if you will. But it was kind of cool, really. I remember it. We talked about it before the hunt each night, and then I had some had little sheets to put on with every scorecard, and we would get the feedback of every handler, whether they liked it, didn't like it, or maybe they could make some remarks, and had a couple of specific questions, and I think we had it set up pretty well. And then the other thing that I did was, hey, I'm going to be here the next day on Saturday. Come back and let's talk about, whatever, just your thoughts on it after you've used it. And one thing that I took away from that event, there was probably 40-60 not in favor of it. Or 60-40 not in favor of it.
Yeah.
The next day, after they did it just one night, I think that pretty much flip-flopped already on that first night. They had I don't remember all of them. There's some of the little details that we talked about with hunters that came back. Well, we had this happen, and you know what? It helped us.
Yeah.
One was, I remember, where they got to or had a creek, and they could tell right where the crossing was.
Yeah.
They knew how far they were and this and that. That kind of that was all, kind of part of it. But number one was that we implemented or wanted to put this in to allow their use was for safety of dogs.
Yeah.
Dogs, we know when they're on a road or place where that we don't want them to be or danger to dogs. That was always number one.
Yeah.
But now today, hey, we have, it's kind of changed. It changed a lot of things. I feel like there's good and pros and cons with it. It used to be, we used to have our ears fixed to listen to every bark a dog made, and now, unfortunately, whether if you call that a bad thing or not, you see handlers looking at their systems a lot, so I think it takes away a little bit from that whole experience of listening to it and hearing all the crickets and seeing the stars and just listening to a dog running off in the distance, but it's also brought a lot of good, a lot of pros as well. So
yeah. I know there's been a lot of discussion on that, but just even trying to imagine these days with the amount of houses that have been built in places that used to be big, hardwood sections, and the more roads being put in. Geez, that just I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. I was down in Tennessee and hunting. I went hunting with my dad one night, and we went to a place where I've hunted, 50 times, a bunch of times in my life, and I realized that the collar that I brought had died. I guess I forgot to charge it or whatever, but I was nervous. We still cut loose one time, and I was a nervous wreck. And I remember when I first got started, I didn't even have a telemetry system. So times have changed, and probably just because of all the development out there, it kind of makes you a little nervous.
Well, one of the times, it was right at the time when we implemented this, was about the time that Garmin came out with their GPS systems. Before that we had the beep beeps and all that. And back in the day, we had some contraptions for tracking dogs.
Absolutely.
And some that I really like that actually work pretty well. But not like what we have today. When Garmin came out with the GPS, that was innovative. As far as our sport's concerned with tracking dogs. But I remember when Mark Zepp came to the office with their new collar, with their tone on it and everything. And I remember when we already were looking at allowing this. I want to say it was around 2012-ish, 10, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And I may be off a little bit, but sometime somewhere in there. But we were sitting in Todd Kellum's office, and he was showing us this collar. He hit that tone button. I heard the tone. I'm like, oh my, that's a problem. I couldn't believe how loud it was. And right away I thought, some dogs that are tone broke, how are they going to react to that? two dogs treed together. It was just louder than I expected. And but so anyways, with all that, we had to come up with allowing their use. We voted it in to allow the use of them, but we also had to write some more rules and different rules for especially for the controlling features on those devices, and systems that had that. So here it is, Section 15. You can find it on your scorecard. The other thing I will say that I'm kind of surprised, other than these rules for locating and controlling device rules really have not changed since the first time. So I think we pretty much covered it pretty well. And now I will say this, we know, you and I, without going into much detail, we know there's some other things that have, as technology has developed and evolved, there's more features on some of these systems that we're going to have to address.
Yeah, being abused out there.
Yep, that are being abused, and we're aware of this, and I think we're kind of looking, and some of it's a little difficult, and I don't think you're going to police everything, but anyway, so starting with locating devices here, says this, Section 15. The handheld of locating only devices may be carried by the handler. Device may be used during the hunt as outlined in current locating device rules. Locating device rules are provided in the host club's event packet and are also available on UKC's website. Lighted collars are allowed. So that's if you have the handheld. If you have just a tracking only collar on your dog that is you're only able to track the dog, then the handheld for that tracking collar may be carried by the handler during the hunt, and you can look at it at any time during the hunt that you want to. And then there's also some rules that go with that that we have available to a club. And we've always had that available to them. I think it was always on the reverse side of the Master Hounds checklist that they could post. And we've done that for years and years and years. So that's not listed. Those rules are not listed here in the rule book. And the reason for that was so if we needed to, we could make some changes to that. And even and those as well, we've not made any changes to them.
Right. Talking about the telemetry rules on the back of your Master Hounds or Hunt Director checklist. So if you guys go check those out. All right, so the next little bullet point here under Rule 15, electronic devices, is talking about controlling devices. And it says, any handheld device capable of controlling a dog, in parentheses it says stimulating or toning, must be left in vehicle and may not be used by handler or spectators until dog-wearing device is scratched and all other dogs are recovered for recasting. So controlling devices, talking about one that's capable of stimulating or toning, so that would be vibrating or shocking or toning. If your collar has that capability, your handheld has to be left in the truck away from being able to use. If you're one caveat to that we could talk about on the telemetry rules is if your collar you're maybe using a collar that's not capable of shocking or toning, and your handheld would have the capability of it, then you can do that. Talking about maybe the Dog Trip Pathfinder 2, obviously it's on your phone, it's an app, and it has the buttons there to vibrate, tone, or to stimulate your dog, but your collar obviously does not have that capability, so you're good to go there. So just some clarification on that, because we sometimes get some questions about that.
Yeah, we talked about toning a little bit, stimulating or shocking, I guess is what stimulating or vibrating or something like that is one thing, where you can only controlling the dog with that the collar is on, or that it's going to that collar. Toning is almost brings up another concern, because with toning, if my dog is not tone broke and yours is, and they're right next to each other, I can almost control your dog. So that's not a good thing for to have out there. So that's why we have pretty strict controlling device rules here. But so let's get into some of the telemetry rules. And again, just like when we wrote these locating device rules back in the day, we haven't changed a thing basically on them. And same way, we also have some telemetry rules beyond that we didn't put in the rule book for, as I mentioned, so we could make any changes if needed. And so far, we've not changed a word on them. So, and that's still true today in June of 2024. So if anything were to change, why, it would probably go on the Master Hounds checklist to get that out ASAP. But so let's go over those really quickly here. And number 1 telemetry rule says, under no circumstances shall telemetry be used to determine the scoring of any dogs. So the intent or the purpose of that rule and what that means is you can't use it to say, mark a dog when it's called treed, where that was, and determining that to use it to determine whether it has left or it hasn't, and things like that. That would be a way of using it to score dogs.
Yeah.
So you still score dogs just like you always have with your ears and your eyes,
right.
Not by this. So that's what rule number 1 is talking about, not for any scoring purposes.
Wouldn't accept a tree call just because somebody's telemetry system is telling them that their dog's stationary and tree, and you'd have to hear the dog with your ears.
That's
Same
exactly
for striking,
right.
Just because it may give you a little logo that the dog has opened up.
Yeah.
Still got to hear the dog open. You're not going off the telemetry system.
That's exactly right. Good point. Yep.
Number 2 here says, if by way of telemetry a handler deems dog to be in danger per an item outlined in Rule 7, which is the timeout rule, they may ask for a cast vote to call timeout. If a majority is not reached, the handler may withdraw, then handle the dog due to safety concerns.
Yeah, and I think you and I talked about that a little bit when we talked about the timeout rule. That hey, as a handler, I should be considerate of your dog too if it really is in danger. But there's also a difference there. If hey, it doesn't mean one of us is right and the other is wrong. One of us may think, okay, it's not. I don't consider it posing a threat or anything like that. The other thing is too, in today's world, we have guys that are, paying a lot for their dogs.
Yeah.
Or they might be handling for somebody else, and not that not every dog is, their safety is important, but, if I've not shelled out $50,000 for a dog either, but maybe if I had, my opinion I might be a little more concerned about where he's at than I might on a $500 dog.
Yeah, that's right.
And not that $500 dog, I'm not concerned for their safety. It's not that. It's not what I mean. But I may be just a little, whatever it is you call that.
Yeah.
Cautious, I guess.
Yeah. And I think the good thing about it is, even though Rule 7 tells us that you're kind of at the mercy of your cast a little bit on a cast vote, having your telemetry system there and being able to see exactly where your dog is, if the cast vote doesn't go your way and you see your dog's in trouble, you still have the ability to withdraw and maybe prevent something bad happening to your hound.
That's exactly right, and that's what the purpose and the intent of this number 1 intent and purpose was right there.
Yep.
At least you can get him out of danger. The other thing, Trevor, I will say this. I remember before we implemented this, it was coming up quite a bit because we have these systems that were not allowing their use during the hunt. You could use it during a timeout or whatever to see where your dogs was, and that was kind of the argument. We have all this technology, and we're not allowing our handlers to use it for a good purpose, really, better the safety of the dogs. And you've heard dogs getting hit on the road and on roads, crossing roads, this and that, and I feel like this has really helped that.
Yeah.
Where a handler does have that opportunity to go get their dog before something bad does happen, and it's
Absolutely.
helped.
Absolutely.
We don't hear of it as much.
Yeah, so number 3 here reads, at no time may a handler demand the cast walk in the direction of a hound that has not been heard opening. The judge or majority of the cast, when hunting judge is used, may agree to walk in that direction. So what this is telling us is it basically goes a little bit hand in hand with number 1 there. You cut dogs loose. You haven't heard the dog open yet, but your telemetry system is telling you your dog's in this direction, and maybe it's a little bit out of pocket now, and you're probably seeing that it's opening up a little bit, and you can't hear the dog, but you're wanting to walk in that direction. Just because, without the dog ever being heard opening, you can't just decide to walk in a direction just because your telemetry system's telling you to. That's not how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I think that rule has allowed a little bit, and I remember that's the one thing that came back in Oklahoma that I mentioned when we had that pilot hunt, that the next what somebody came back and said is something as simple as hey, I knew where dog A was, and I now know where dog B is, in almost in opposite directions. It allowed us to kind of get in the middle, so we could still judge both dogs. And they liked that. But yeah. So next one, number 4. When considering the use of telemetry during the hunt, the handler may not interfere with any handler's ability to listen for their hound. This is to be rigidly enforced. Handlers not adhering after being warned of such by the judge shall result in their dog being scratched from the cast. Number 4 here, you might be surprised what the intent of that rule was. But you got to consider this, and this dates it a little bit, and we kind of chuckle about it now, and it's probably one that could be removed. But this is when these GPS systems first came out, and before that, a lot of people were still using the beep beep.
Oh, okay.
This rule was intended for the beep beep because you didn't want to be out there in the cast during the hunt, and beep 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. That's what this... Yeah, and they're trying to listen for their dogs. That's what number 4 was, the purpose of number 4.
I gotcha.
So if you read that and you think, what is this? Okay. Most times you probably just kind of skip over that because you don't... But that's what that rule was intended for.
Yeah, I was kind of
chuckle about it now, but...
I don't know what to say about this rule, but I'm glad you took that one.
Yeah. And really, if you think about it, this is 2024, okay? It was... 10, 12 years ago, so it's not been that long, but it seems longer, I think.
Number 5 here, which is the last telemetry rule before we get into some general information. It says, a master, hounds, or panel may not consider any debate that is based on telemetry use. I think you probably made a good example there on number 1. Maybe somebody's marked a tree where their dog was, and the guy who's judging had made a call that he thought the dog had left the tree and maybe came back or whatever, and the guy said, hey, right here, I got it right here on my Dog Trip Pathfinder 2 that my dog never did leave that tree. Look right here. And number 5 here tells us you can't do that.
Yep. Or another one, maybe an example of that might be, well, my telemetry system shows that my dog was in fact opening or barking. It showed it right here, and he was only 500 yards away. They should have been able to hear it, but he couldn't hear it. No, all that doesn't matter.
One cool feature on the Dog Trip Pathfinder 2 is I don't know if you've ever done it before, but before I ever cut my dog loose, a few times I've did it where I could record the entire hunt, and you can see your dog, going through the section and falling tree and that sort of thing. So you could save it and go back and replay the hunt and just see exactly where your dog did it and did in fast motion.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't be able to show that to the master hounds or the panel.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So then we also have, those were the first, or the 5 telemetry rules that we had. Then we also have general information underneath that. So 4 different bullet points there. And the first one says the handheld of locating, which means tracking only systems, may be carried and used during the hunt. It just goes back and kind of covers what we talked about in Rule 15 there. The second one, a dog must be heard opening before a strike or tree call may be accepted, regardless of any telemetry system alerts or information. And I think that's what we were talking about a little bit ago. So, any handheld device capable of both locating, which is tracking, and controlling, which is stimulating or toning, may not be carried by the handler during hunt time. The handheld can't be carried. That handheld must be left in the vehicle. So that means you have a collar on the dog that is capable of shocking or toning it. And with the handheld, you can make that. You can control it, shock it, or tone it. This handheld must now be left in the vehicle. However, the handheld may be used during timeout situations during the hunt for locating purposes only. So you can actually use a collar, with the prongs in it and such. And we get the question all the time. We got it a lot. What if I take my prongs out? You can take your prongs out, but that still doesn't satisfy. You can still stimulate, and technically you still, send the current through there. But there's, the tone is also another feature. So just by removing those prongs, that doesn't satisfy that.
Right.
If it's capable of it, with or without prongs in it, you got to leave the handheld in the truck. And remember, we also, in the rules, it talks about can't be used by spectators either, so sitting back at the truck, and I can tell you we'll get to it here in a minute here. That'll key in on a little bit. But for now, However, the handheld may be used during timeout situations during the hunt for locating purposes only. So if you're in a timeout, then you can use it, but also don't be using the controlling features, but just for locating purposes only. You can go grab your hand if timeout is called during the hunt.
That'd be a bit of an unfair advantage for you that other people don't have advantage of there.
Yeah. The handheld of controlling only, so that's stimulating or toning systems, must be left in vehicle and may not be used by handler or spectators until dog-wearing device is scratched and all other dogs are recovered for recasting. That is actually the old controlling device rules, because we used some before Garmin came out with there used to be the Tritronics collars, and they still have those, just controlling only collars. Those devices, those handhelds still can't be carried at any time. And matter of fact, you can't even use those during a timeout. And even if you'd use them, the only time you can use them is if all other dogs are recovered. The dog that you're going to use it on has been scratched from the hunt, and all other dogs are recovered for recasting. Yeah. That's a mouthful right there. It's not that much, but it's very black and white. And I can tell you this last one is bolded here that says controlling device rule violations may result in suspension. So UKC has been pretty strict with this over the years, and anybody that's been found to have used it while other dogs, not all other dogs are recovered, recovered means recovered. Doesn't matter. You can make the debate, well, the dog was way away from my dog. All that doesn't matter. Only then can you use it. And I can tell you, we have suspended. There's still guys on the list that are suspended for that.
Yeah.
Don't use it. You just can't use it.
Yep.
So
there you go.
I don't know if you got anything to add to all that or not, but there you go.
I think we covered the telemetry and talking about electronic devices pretty well.
All right.
Alan, you've been feeding Eukanuba dog feed for a while now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have, and I've really been able to put my beagles to the test, mainly running snowshoe hare up north where they run the hardest, where I put 15, 20, 25 miles on them easily in a day. And I've found that the premium performance sport has really paid dividends. Mainly, I noticed their stamina.
Yeah, same feed that I've been feeding. I think my dog looks good on it. He's really feeling good, and less kennel cleanup for me, so I highly recommend it as well.
Eukanuba, the official performance dog nutrition partner of UKC.
On this edition, we're going to take a look at the panel and appeal procedure for situations happening during a night hunt, and you'll find this in a rule book directly following the running rules 1 through 16.
Yeah, so let's start with some preface stuff here in the rules that it talks about all this. And this procedure applies for all situations arising during the time that the judge's authority is in effect. The authority of the judge begins when he is officially designated and receives the scorecard. The authority of the judge ceases when the scorecard is turned in to the master of hounds, or sometimes to the hunt director, depending on the format. The Coonhound Advisor column appearing in Coonhound Bloodlines provides official interpretations of UKC rules and policies. The appeal procedure does not apply to the zones or finals of the UKC World Coonhound Night Hunt Championship. The appeal procedure does not apply to the regions or finals of the UKC Tournament Champions. The Master of Hounds decision will be final in all situations pertaining to activities during the actual hunt of those events that we mentioned there. And the reason for that is the officials we use there are our field reps, that they also have the authority to contact us at UKC if they have any questions about making a ruling before they make their ruling.
Right.
So generally, and that has really worked quite well. And that's the only reason there's not an appeal procedure. And those events also require their elimination events that need to move on, right? Exactly. Dogs move on and decisions need to be made right away. So the normal procedure for appeals to UKC happens where they send the paperwork to UKC that's done, makes the situation pending. It might be pending for a week until the decision is made, So, but obviously in some of those events, you You got to make a decision right away, and that's why it doesn't apply there in the same manner. It does in some form, but not like that.
Yeah.
And not where the handler appeals it per se. It's just that the officials discuss it with us if need be. Some are simple things, but if they have any question, they bring it to us.
Yeah, the only thing I can add to that whole preface is if somebody was just to read this section, it just says the Coonhound Advisor column appearing in Coonhound Bloodlines, just so everybody knows that is it's available on the website, and it has been. If you go to ukcdogs.com and you navigate through Coonhounds and you go to news, the advisor columns are there under the news portion, and those go all the way back to about 2016. So there's quite a few on there. So that's a great reference point if you're ever kind of bored and want to do some reading. That's a great resource for event officials and for judges and for anybody interested in hunts.
There you go. So we're talking here about panel and appeal procedures for situations happening, that and there's steps that must be followed. So several steps here, I think about 5 of them. Then we're also going to talk about panel responsibilities. But hey, let's start with step 1.
Step 1 says, attempt to resolve the question with the licensed master of hounds, the handler raising the question, the judge of the cast, and the other members of the cast that are available. So remember, this is the panel and appeal decision. So in the woods, we've already talked about what happens in the woods, where the judge makes the call, and whether you're using a hunting judge or a non-hunting judge, you've placed a question, you've done your cast vote, depending on which format you're hunting under, and all that's already happened. So now you're bringing a question back to the master of hounds or to the hunt director to have it heard. And so in that situation, you're going to have your event official, you're either your master of hounds or your panel, and you're going to have the handler raising the question, the judge of the cast, and all the other members of the cast that are there. The next sentence says, the master of hounds will make a decision based upon the statement of the case provided by the handler, judge, and the other cast members of the cast. No complaints will be considered by the master of hounds after a period of 30 minutes has elapsed from the time that the scorecard has been turned in.
Yeah, and there's a time period right there. I think sometimes we forget, but most of the times that doesn't happen. But if there's a question mark on the scorecard, step 1 is actually going directly to a master of hounds and not a panel yet. But they have 30 minutes, and after that's the one thing the master of hounds does when the scorecard comes in. They note the time received, and then if there's any questions on it, the cast must be back there to get it resolved within 30 minutes of that time. And if not, he won't hear it either. There's procedures in place, and this is step 1, and procedures not followed, why it won't be considered. So, step 2. Go ahead.
Step 2 says, if the question is not resolved at step 1, request that a panel be formed. Remember, if you're using a hunt director format, you're going to skip step 1 and go directly to step 2 where the panel comes into play. A panel fee of $20 must accompany the request. Most people, sometimes they forget about that panel fee. If you're using a hunt director format, even for a question to be heard, it goes directly to a panel, and any question to be heard is going to be a $20 fee. The Master of Hounds Hunt Director will then assemble a panel of 3 responsible, impartial individuals who are familiar with UKC's policies and procedures. And in parentheses, it says this is the first step taken when using the Hunt Director format. If panel rules with handler, fee will be refunded. If they disagree, the panel fee will be retained by the host club. And then the host club would then in turn that in with their paperwork when they send it to UKC. The panel meeting must be held within 1 hour after the deadline for the return of scorecards. So there we have another deadline to take into consideration.
Yep, that's it. And that's pretty straightforward, I think. There's got to be a fee with it. Otherwise, the panel shouldn't even consider a question. And obviously can be anybody. They don't have to be officials or anything like that. But just somebody they're responsible and impartial, and I think that pretty much sums it up. Like the 1 hour deadline after the deadline for the return of scorecards, the panel meeting must be held within 1 hour after that. It can be held before that as well, but it has to be within 1 hour after that.
Yeah, and a situation where you may have to wait a little bit is possibly to form a panel. You may have to wait for some other hunters to come in for a local club or a situation like that.
Exactly right. Yeah, you got to kind of be considerate of that sometimes. So, yeah. And that's also why we, the Master Hounds checklist, Hunt Director checklist says, it talks about questions. If you question something, just a reminder to hunters, don't bring your questions back unless it involves a dog being scratched, until after the hunt. And that's to make sure we have people back there for a panel.
Yep. Step 3 goes on to tell us the panel will hear all sides. At the conclusion of all testimony, the panel will make a ruling. The event report shall reflect the panel's decision.
Yeah, that's kind of key for officials or hunt director or whatever. If they and especially a Master Hounds here. Let's say I'm the Master Hounds. I made a ruling. Somebody questioned my ruling and wanted to take it to a panel. They have the right to do that, and they do it. And then the panel overturns my decision as the Master Hounds. The hunt director or the Master Hounds should then fill out the panel. If it changed the outcome of a winner or something, the report should reflect the panel's decision.
Right.
At that point. So.
And you put down the panel's, just to be clear, you put down the panel's decision, even if they were to go to this next step forward, where they're going to appeal it, so that we know what their ruling was.
Exactly.
Yep. And step 4 goes on to tell us if the question is not resolved at step 3, a handler must immediately request a UKC appeal form while the panel is still assembled.
Yeah, and I think that's key right there. That doesn't mean get up and go out and talk to your buddies, or even go out and leave the table. That's while the panel is still assembled. When they're assembled, that means they're still at the table. They have made their ruling, and that's their decision. It's at that point. Anybody that doesn't agree with it or thinks it's still wrong, remember we talked about judgment calls, what those are. Be reasonable about it, But if you feel strongly and you have a rule to back it up, what is being misapplied here or not considered, then do that. The procedures are here in place to get it right. Even if it needs to come to the final step. But one of them here, following the procedures, you must immediately request an appeal form. One of the reasons for that is it used to be back in the old days, if you went to a panel, you had to fill out paperwork. Now there's no paperwork unless you get to the step 4 where you want to request an appeal. And another reason to do it while the panel is assembled, so you get everybody's information. Every panel member or the hearing panel or the panel members are going to have their names on it with phone numbers. Now we're talking about there's going to be documentation. Paperwork comes into play here. And all the cast members with their phone numbers, so we can get information is gathered that then goes to UKC for them to make the final decision. So there's different reasons for them to make the request right away and not wait till 5 minutes later the panel is disassembled and, oh, where's Joe? He's already left. Well, can somebody does somebody have Joe's number or and all that? So it's just organization in that.
The next sentence here reads, in something you talked about just then, I think, the form must be filled out by the handlers on the cast, the members of the panel, and the Master Hounds and Hunt Director. And the next sentence reads, a fee of $20 must accompany the appeal when sent to UKC. So now this is a separate $20 than the $20 panel fee that you paid already. It says the appeal form must be included with the event report mailed to UKC. Additionally, the panel must complete the panel meeting results form when appeal to UKC is filed and include it with the event report that is submitted to UKC. And that's just so we know what the panel's ruling was.
And that's basically what I was just saying. I should have just shut up and should have just read what it says.
We'll move on to step 5 then. It says UKC will investigate the matter and make a final ruling. If UKC supports the individual filing the appeal, the fee will be refunded. A written statement reflecting the final ruling will be mailed to those involved. UKC reserves unto itself, in its sole judgment and discretion, the right to make corrections it deems necessary.
Yeah, and back in the day, Trevor, we used to get a lot more appeals than we did now. It used to be if they didn't agree with the Master Hound's decision, they would ask for an appeal. There was no fee associated with it, and I could show you up there. We still have them. There's, they're still on record, and I kept a folder of them, put them all in there, and it was a weekly thing. Somewhere around the country, we got appeals that we had to resolve every week. We started putting a fee on it and kind of went to this format here with it, and that changed dramatically. We went from having, I don't know, I probably 40, 50 a year to maybe, 2 or 3 now? Yeah. How many have you done?
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 in
Yeah.
5 years.
Well, there you go. So I think it's worked pretty well. And hey, the money is not about money. The money is more about make sure you have something legit to appeal.
Yeah.
And we want to get it right. We really do want to get it right. But those are the steps there. You got anything else to add to that?
No, not really. I think like you covered in the fee responsibility, the first thing is just cuts down on frivolous questions, and that's the main point of that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I will add to it, if an appeal comes to us and we figure out in our investigation, we find that you didn't follow these procedures, or maybe you didn't take it to a panel, or you just went in and wanted to file an appeal to UK, that's not going to work.
Exactly.
You got to go through these steps and try to get it resolved the way it's supposed to be resolved following these steps. Or if, let's say, for instance, we find that one of them is that you didn't request the appeal when the panel is still assembled. I guess you don't have an appeal. You got to follow. You got to do your part. And we've got these rules that we're also bound by them.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about some panel responsibilities.
Yeah, so it's a little section here at the end of the appeal and panel section here, and it says, a panel of qualified event participants needs to be formed in 2 situations. 1, in the event a handler is not satisfied with the Master of Hound ruling in a Master of Hounds format event, and 2, when a question is placed on the card in a Hunt Director format event. So we've talked about that a little bit. You form a panel when a question comes in. If it's a Master of Hounds format, it follows the Master of Hounds ruling if the person wants to put up the $20 and have a panel assembled. Or if you're in a Hunt Director format, you go directly to the panel where the Hunt Director will form the panel after you pay the $20 panel fee. Yep. It says complaint panels should consist of 3 individuals who are current on all night hunt rules and policies. They may or may not be club members, with primary concern going towards finding individuals that are knowledgeable, honest, and impartial. A panel must be formed of individuals that can remain totally objective in concerns to cast members and dogs on the cast in question.
Yeah, and I think that's right there. We need to maybe just add to that a little bit just to clarify. I don't know what we need to clarify other than the best interest should be that they have somebody using somebody that knows what they're talking about. And can you imagine how it would be if I came in, or you came in with a legit question, and I form a panel of maybe 1 or whatever of people that don't know much about night hunt rules or anything, aren't experienced.
Frustrating.
Very frustrating. No, you want the best that we can get you. Maybe sometimes. Hey, we might not always have, the best in the country, but we're going to need to try to get you the best that we have in the available there. Yeah. And that's it should be taken seriously, and that's when oftentimes if you get the right people in it, that's where they can also get it resolved.
Exactly. Yep. Next sentence here goes on to say individuals who have a dog in contention to place in the event should not be used on a panel. So that's where the impartialness comes in. You don't want to get a co-owner of the dog or the owner of the dog or even a best buddy or something. But there's even more to take into consideration than that. You take in other cast winners or placements where if one dog were to win over another, they could benefit from that decision. So
even if I didn't rule in that, even if I didn't rule in that favor or in that way or whatever, I'm in contention of place, and I'm ruling on your question. It should just take me out of the equation. It's a perception thing. Yep.
Yep. And I think now, with like I've said before previously already, the cast win format compared to placement format, you really don't see much issue here as far as
right.
It goes on to say here, the panel will hear all viewpoints of cast members and come to a consensus decision regarding the final scoring of the cast.
Pretty cut and dry there.
Yeah, more than likely they're going to maybe step away or ask you guys to step out for a second so they can do some discussions, and they're going to take everybody's testimony and make the best decision they can.
Yep, and right there I will add to that, whether you have the cast members step away or the panel steps away, I would always suggest the panel step away and keep the cast members there. versus the other way. When they come back, where are the cast members? Now I got to round them up again.
Yeah.
Keep them there. You move away and make your decision and come back and give that decision, and then leave it at that.
It says here, should a panel's decision support the complainant, the $20 will be refunded. So if the person with the question who appealed the Master Hound's decision or went straight to a panel under the Hunt Director format and they rule in that person's favor, they'll get their $20 back. Goes on to say, should the panel's decision go against the complainant, the $20 will be forwarded to UKC to deposit to the youth fund. So in the things there, you'll see that it's retained by the club, so they will retain the $20. But then on their paperwork, there's a spot on there on the event fee worksheet where it says the $20 has the amount of panel fee that you took in, and it tells you right here under panel responsibilities, the $20 will be forwarded to UKC, and that goes into the youth fund.
Yeah. So one other thing that I will add, two things actually. One is that we get a question on sometimes, can the hunt director or may the hunt director also sit on the panel? And the answer to that is absolutely, if they qualify as, under the criteria for a panel member. Absolutely, they can be one of them. Number two is I would suggest that, if you feel something was scored incorrectly or ruled on incorrectly by the official or by the panel, by all rights, follow these steps and we'll try to get it right. If that was the case, and you do follow the procedures in place for it, rather that than getting all bent out of shape about something. Follow these procedures, and the thing is, they're in place for a reason, and that's to get it right at the end of the day. But you got to do your job. The one thing that is frustrating to us is to listen to somebody complaining, just wanting to complain, that had this option that did not wants us to do something about it without them doing their part. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping us. Our hands are bound by the rules as well, just as much as yours are. You do your part. We'll do our part, and if you were right, then we'll get it. We'll get it right.
Yep, there you go.
So hopefully that'll help, folks. So there's the procedures. It's in the rule book. We've written about it, but hopefully talking about it, clarifying a little more, and going over to here will be beneficial to everybody.
Thank you for listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow so you don't miss any of our new episodes or content.